Welcome back to the laboratory, dear friends. Tonight, a heist. Nothing was stolen, no alarms were tripped, and yet, for 4.5 minutes, one of the largest broadcasters in America was robbed of its own voice. It is 25 minutes past midnight, April 27th, 1986. Across the eastern half of America, night owls are watching a spy movie on HBO. And then the movie vanishes. In its place, color bars and a message. A polite little message, addressed to HBO itself, complaining about a price. It is signed Captain Midnight. And in the control rooms of one of television's mightiest empires, engineers stare at their screens and realize something extraordinary. They cannot take their own channel back. I am the magnanimous Dr. Warthan, and this is the Broken Machine Society. Case file number 3, Captain Midnight. If you enjoy tales of magnificent catastrophe, do tap that like button. Gently. The Society repairs quite enough machines as it is. Now, to understand tonight's caper, you must first understand the sky above 1986. Satellite television was young and glorious and a little bit lawless. Millions of Americans had planted enormous metal dishes in their backyards, great 10-foot flowers of aluminum, all blooming toward the southern sky. And for a few glorious years, those flowers drank for free. Everything the satellites carried simply fell out of the sky to anyone with a dish. The movies, the sports feeds, the raw news lines before the anchors combed their hair. A grey, wild, wonderful frontier, and an entire cottage industry of dish salesmen grew up to serve it. And up there, on the usual impossible parking spot, hung a satellite named Galaxy 1, relaying HBO to the entire nation. And here is the part you must remember, because it matters later. A broadcast satellite is not clever. It is a mirror in the sky. A station on the ground shouts up at it with a great dish, and the satellite simply repeats what it hears, back down to half the planet. It does not check credentials. It does not recognize voices. It repeats whoever shouts loudest. But trouble was brewing down below. In January of 1986, HBO began scrambling its signal and asked the backyard dish owners for $12.95 a month to unscramble it. Reasonable, perhaps, but for the men who sold those backyard dishes, it was catastrophe. Overnight, the great aluminum flowers stopped selling, and in Ocala, Florida, one such dish salesman, a young man named John, watched his business wither. By day, he sold dishes nobody wanted anymore. By night, he worked the graveyard shift at a satellite uplink station, pointing 30 feet of steel at the heavens on behalf of paying customers. Speaking of communications, I am told it is time for a brief word from tonight's sponsor.
I have no sponsor. The offer stands. Now, where were we? Yes, April 27th, the end of another midnight shift. Our salesman finishes his scheduled work and finds himself alone, with a 30-foot dish, a transmitter, and a keyboard for putting text on television screens. And somewhere between frustration and temptation, Captain Midnight is born. He types his message, he swings the great dish toward Galaxy 1, and he presses transmit. Remember the mirror in the sky? HBO was shouting at that satellite from the ground, and Captain Midnight simply shouted louder. The satellite, honest machine that it is, did exactly its job. It repeated the loudest voice to the eastern seaboard of the United States. The movie dissolved, the color bars rose, and a nation of night owls read a dish salesman's complaint, in letters of light, 40,000 miles round trip. For a few desperate moments, HBO fought back. Their engineers turned up the power, trying to outshout the intruder. The captain nudged his own power higher still. A tug of war, dear friends, between two beams of energy
fought inside a single transponder hanging over the equator, until the captain, suddenly terrified he might actually damage the satellite, let go of the rope. 4.5 minutes after it began, the movie returned as if nothing had happened. He tidied his console and drove home. Then came the hunt, and oh, it is a lovely one. The authorities were furious, but how do you find one voice in an empty sky? Physics narrowed the field. Only a modest number of dishes in America were big enough to shout that loudly at Galaxy 1. Then came the beautiful clue, the font. The message's lettering carried the fingerprints of one particular model of character generator, the machine that types words onto television. Investigators made a list of every facility that owned one, crossed it against who could transmit that night, and the empty sky got very small indeed. And then, as in all good detective stories, came the stranger at a payphone, a tip from an overheard conversation sealing the case. Within months, the captain unmasked, John, the dish salesman of Ocala. And now, the punchline of our heist. This was arguably the most famous act of broadcast piracy in American history, and the law of 1986 barely had a name for it. The sentence, a $5,000 fine and a year of probation. The mightiest signal intrusion of the age cost less than a used sedan. Congress, deeply unamused, promptly made satellite hijacking a felony. The captain hung up his cape forever. But the legacy, dear friends, is everywhere above you. Uplink stations learned to guard their dishes like vaults. Regulators required transmitters to carry identification, a signature woven into the signal itself so that every voice in the sky would forever carry a name tag. The mirror still repeats the loudest voice, but now the mirror remembers who shouted. And the scrambling wars themselves raged on for a decade. Encryption against pirate chip, new lock against new key. An arms race fought in living rooms across America. The wild frontier was fenced, acre by acre, and the age of television falling freely out of the sky quietly ended. And the very next year, a copycat in Chicago wearing a plastic mask would prove the captain's lesson had not yet been learned by everyone. But that, members, is a case file for another evening. And here is tonight's lesson, so listen closely. The satellite was never broken, not for 1 second. It performed its single duty flawlessly. Repeat the loudest voice. The flaw was in the assumption, the quiet, comfortable, empire-sized assumption that the loudest voice would always be yours. Machines are honest, dear friends. It is their owners who forget what, exactly, the machine was told to do. Case closed. Next time, before the society, a machine built to watch the sky told one man that the world was ending. 5 missiles, it said, inbound, certain, and the man chose not to believe it. The society will convene in its most serious session yet. Stay curious, mind your volume, and be kind to your local dish salesman.
The society is adjourned.